Sorry guys, I'm not feeling the best today, but I'm going to do my best to be energetic, right? Um, before I start off with this message, we've been going on this month about Unashamed, right? Finding the courage to fulfill your destiny, and it doesn't stop just at yourself. It continues on to the next person. Okay, helping each other realize the people that we are supposed to be, that we're supposed to become. And so, as I give this message today, I hope that we can keep that in mind as we continue throughout this series. So, why don't you join me in a word of prayer, and we'll get started. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, I'm not feeling the best today, Lord, and I ask that you give me the strength to get through this. And Lord, I also pray for all the things that are going on right now, dear Lord. I ask at this time that you would grant us a moment of peace, a moment of calm mind and of calm spirit. And Lord, as we prepare our hearts and our minds to receive your words today, Lord, I pray that if there are any evil ways within us, if there are things that we wish to submit to you, I pray that they would all come to the surface and that your words would ring loud and clear to us as we hear your message today. And in Jesus' name we ask all of these things. Amen. How many of you have ever been to a wishing well before? Yep. Okay, so wishing well, right? You get a coin, you flip the coin, put it in the well, right? And you're supposed to make a wish, right? Or you go outside and you see a shooting star. Have any of you seen a shooting star before? Yeah, I've seen one in my life. I wish I've seen more. But yeah, shooting stars, something you can make a wish on, right? Even Disney, right? You can make a wish upon a star, right? And so, with our wishes, okay, those desires, those dreams, how much do those mean to us as people? How much do our dreams mean to us? How many things do we have in life that we're just simply not willing to let go? Okay, eventually we come to a point in our lives where, we either embrace the future that's in front of us and we let go of the things of the past, or we drag the things of the past along with us and never make progress towards those dreams, towards those desires, right? And, the dreams that we have here and now, okay, I want each of you to just think a little deeper about yourselves, about something that you have in mind that you don't want to let go. Okay, something that you, throughout your life, have never wanted to let go. Can you think of anything? You don't have to share it, but I just want that to be at the front of your mind, because, this month we've been also talking about dreams, because we've been talking about Joseph, right? Joseph was, he was a special kid, and those of you who weren't here last week, we talked about Joseph's story, and we're going to continue to talk about Joseph's story, but just to catch everybody up to the same point, okay, Joseph, he comes from a very dysfunctional family, right? You've got three stepmoms living in the same house, okay, 10 stepbrothers, and his brothers, they sell him into slavery, and then Joseph is, he's sold to a very high-ranking official named Potiphar, and he works his way up the ladder, starts to be important, and then all of a sudden, Potiphar's wife, she tries to seduce him, and he doesn't want to have any of that, and she falsely accuses him of trying to take advantage of her, and then he's thrown in prison. Okay, that's where we're at right now. And when we continue this story about Joseph, right, so we come into the prison cell, right, and Joseph, last week I talked about, how he must have been thinking, man, why am I so special? Why am I so special that I found myself into this prison? Right? And during Joseph's time in prison, okay, he's there for more than 2 years, okay? So Joseph, during his time in prison, he meets another gentleman, okay, and this guy was a cupbearer. And the cupbearer has a dream, and Joseph is able to interpret his dream with God's help. And he says, in 3 days, you'll be released from this place. And when you go back before the king, please remember me. Remember to tell him about me. And so, this guy, he gets released, and then he goes to the king, and he completely forgets about Joseph. Okay, so Joseph is completely abandoned. His whole life, he's known nothing but betrayal. No real sense of comfort. Okay, so then we fast forward in our story, and Pharaoh, they're about to have this big meeting, and then Pharaoh is so troubled because he has this dream, and he talks to all the wise men, and he says, "Is there anybody who can interpret my dream? Because I feel like it's something that's come from beyond me." And when we get to our point here in Genesis 41, okay, the Pharaoh has gone all over the place looking for somebody who can interpret this dream.
And tell him what the dream was.
And also tell him what the dream was. And so someone says, "Oh, well, I remember that there's this guy that's been in prison for a while, but he can probably help you out. He can probably interpret your dream." So the Pharaoh, he summons Joseph out of the prison. And they take him out, and they spruce him up, and then take him before the Pharaoh. And what we're going to look at here in Genesis 41 is the conversation that occurs between Joseph and the Pharaoh. And it starts off something like this, 41 verse 15. It says, "Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it.'" And then Joseph's response is an important one, because even though Joseph has been through all of these things, one thing that he was not willing to give up was his faith in a God that would take care of him. And this is his response. He says, "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to the Pharaoh, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Okay, this is important for us because despite being thrown in jail, despite being sold as a slave, despite having his integrity challenged, okay, still Joseph found a reason to say that my God is greater. Let the glory be to him and not to myself. Right? And so Joseph gives this reply, and then he goes on to tell the Pharaoh what his dream was and to interpret it. Okay, there were these 7 fat cows. Okay, and 7 fat, healthy cows, and then these 7 skinny cows come along. And I don't know how this happens in the dream, but the skinny ones eat the fat cows, and they don't get any bigger, right? And then there are 7 healthy grains, and then 7 very poor grains, and the poor ones also come and eat the healthy grain, but they do not get any bigger, right? And so, what does this mean? So Joseph tells them that the seven healthy cows represent abundance. That for the next 7 years, things are going to be awesome. Okay, there's going to be so much productivity. The economy is going to be great. There's going to be so much food. It's going to be unbelievable. But then, to follow, there will be 7 years of terrible, terrible famine like Egypt has never seen. That the 7 good years will be all but forgotten. So he says all of this. And you have to put this into perspective a little bit. Because Joseph at this point, right, he's just some guy who, they brought him out of prison. And here you are before the highest person in the land, and you give him the bad news on top of the good news. Okay, but you also gave him the truth. Okay, it took a lot of boldness for Joseph to do something like this, right? And so Pharaoh, okay, we jump down to verse 33, says, "And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man to put him in charge of the land of Egypt." And so at this point, okay, Joseph, he's offering himself out, right? Because before this, Joseph, he was an organized guy, right? He knew how to get stuff done. That's how he was able to work his way up when he was with Potiphar. And then you jump down to verse 37, okay? Joseph says, the Pharaoh says, "The plan seemed good to the Pharaoh and to all the officials, and the Pharaoh asked him, 'Can we find anyone like this man Joseph, okay, in whom is the Spirit of God?'" Okay, the Pharaoh could acknowledge that there was something special about Joseph. Joseph invited opportunity through his boldness. As some of you can think back to times in your life where you wish you would have stepped in to do something. Right? Some of you can think of times, even something present, and you're like, man, if I wish I could just take that step forward, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Some of you, it's in your Christian walk, and you're just like, I don't know if I can be a bold Christian in a culture where it's not popular to be a Christian. Right? What opportunities do you need to be open to? What opportunities is God bringing into your life that you are refusing to look at? Okay, one of the truths about these moments, okay, that sabotages our success, our ability to move forward, is that we're afraid to step into things because we're afraid to put our trust in God to do what only God can do. That's what it comes down to. Right? When we look at a situation and it's completely overwhelming, it is so easy to take the step back and say, no, I'm not going to do it. Right? But here we're trying to grow. We're trying to grow together. We're trying to grow our faith. And there are opportunities that can only happen when we take that bold step forward. Okay, God has gifted each one of us differently. But none of us can get away from the fact that the dreams that God has put in place for you to aspire to, the dreams that you have, that you want to hang on to, God can make those possible, but you have to be willing to put your trust in Him. You have to be willing to. Okay, we go back to Joseph, right? Joseph, despite all of these things, still found a reason to put his trust in God. Okay, the Lord takes care of His people. How many of you believe that? How many of you can believe that? That God takes care of His people. Okay, Joseph had to do something. And I'm going to keep going on this with my next point, but Joseph had to accept his current reality of things. All right, let's do a check, right? Because Joseph's situation is, I'm born into a family where only my father loves me. I'm sold as a slave. I'm falsely accused. Just when I think that things are getting better for me, I'm forgotten about. I did something to get this other guy out of here, but then he totally cast me off to the wayside. Right? Joseph, accepting his current reality, still found a reason to put his trust in God. Okay, now throughout this time, okay, after Joseph offers himself to the Pharaoh to get this task done, to fix the problems that are coming, okay, Pharaoh tries to do some molding on Joseph. Okay, he tries to mold the kind of person that he is. Okay, you look at verse 42. It says, "And Pharaoh took a signet ring from his finger, and he put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck." Okay, when you've accepted, okay, the Pharaoh's ring, right? This was a type of seal. Okay, for Joseph to have this is saying, I have the authority. I have the authority underneath the highest person of the land. Okay, and then the gold chain that's around his neck too. Each of these things symbolizes power. Okay, he's coming from nothing once again. He's coming from nothing once again into absolute power. Okay, you read the next verse. It says, "He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and the people shouted before him, 'Make way!' or 'Bow down!' Right? Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt." And you talk about going from a something to nothing, or from a nothing to something story, right? What truth are you struggling to face in your life right now? What truth are you struggling to face in your life right now? Okay, I said that Joseph had to accept his reality, his current reality. And, there were the other pieces to this, right? That he went through this shape-shifting and, he became an Egyptian. Okay, you read on and he's even given an Egyptian name. Okay, forget about being Joseph anymore, right? He's not Joseph anymore. Okay, he's given an Egyptian name, and his identity, the person that he wanted to become. Okay, it wasn't an Egyptian. It wasn't supposed to be, going to be a slave, right? More so, he wanted to keep his identity as a believer in the God of the universe. More so, okay, Joseph had understood that his new reality was not all that he wanted, right? But in order to experience what God had put before him, he had to be bold. He had to take that step forward. He had to do things full force. And so I ask the question, what truth are you struggling to face in your life right now? Okay, do you lack that boldness that Joseph had? Okay, do you want to give up that dream that you have for something better? Joseph embraced the grieving process. I asked you at the beginning to think about your dreams. It's something that you haven't been able to let go of. If you weren't able to think of something, then follow my train of thought on this one. But think about a moment in your life that was most painful. Okay? It doesn't have to be something that you've gotten through. It can be something that you rose on top of. But put that into the forefront of your mind. Joseph embraced the grieving process. If you want to be successful, if you want to live your life for God, and if you want to live your life in pursuit of your dreams, of the life that God had placed before you, then you must embrace the grieving process. Joseph was put through all of these things. And he had to embrace the grieving process. Joseph, okay, he gets married. And then he names his firstborn Manasseh. And it says here in verse 51, Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, "It is because God has made me forget all of my trouble and all of my father's household." Okay, his child, the name that he gave his child, the one that he loves so much, is to be a reminder for him. So that every time he gets upset about, man, look at all the stuff I went through. Where was this dream? Where was God in all of this? Manasseh. He can look at his son and say, Manasseh, oh, beloved Manasseh, you have reminded me that God had brought me through, that I can forget all of these troubles. And he did the same thing with the second son. Okay, verse 52, the second son he named Ephraim, and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Okay, God took what was so horrible, and he used it for good. He still found a way to use it for good. So when will you take the time to grieve the losses in your life? Okay, you can't get, the reality is you cannot get back what is lost. You can't. It is outside of your power. It is completely outside of your power. When will you take the time to grieve the losses in your life? Because choosing to take the time to grieve over what was lost is so important. All right, choose to take the time to grieve over what is lost, or it will take the time from you. There is no pride. There is no pride in sucking it up, because you will drag it for the rest of your life. It will come up for the rest of your life unless you learn to grieve the loss. You have to grieve. This is a truth that God has taught us about ourselves. Okay, we can be strong, but a part of the human experience is learning how to grieve. But we have to move on. You lose so much more, if you don't take the time to grieve. God has yet a bright future for you and for me, for all of his people. Okay, we think about things like heaven. All right, that's a bright future. Okay, the Lord takes care of his people. Okay, you continue to read Joseph's story, and I'm going to touch on this, and we're going to touch on this next week. But you continue to read his story, and Joseph, okay, the secret to his success was his ability to forgive. His ability to not just forgive others, but the ability to forgive himself. All right, he looked back and he understood that God allowed him to be sold into slavery because he had a plan for him. Okay, God had a plan for him to save the land of Egypt. He looked back and understood that God allowed injustice for him to be wrongly accused by Potiphar's wife because he had a plan for him. God allowed him to be sold as a slave, betrayed by his family, so that he could save them. God had a plan for him when the cupbearer, who he saved from the prison cell, and was totally forgotten, God still had a plan for him. Do you understand what I'm telling you, church? You can take the time to grieve the loss in your life. you have to remember where your help comes from. You have to remember where your help comes from. Okay, John 15, verse 1 and 2. It's my last verse for the night. It says, I am the one true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. Okay, those of you who garden, you know exactly what this is talking about. Right? Sometimes you gotta, even though you have something that's growing pretty well, starts to sprout off in a couple of directions, some things die. But the things that are dying, if you don't cut them off, it takes away from the rest. Right? God is shaping you. God is shaping you in all of your experiences and all the people that you come across. He's shaping you so that you can be the person that you were meant to be. Okay, stop asking yourself, if I had only done this, if I had only chosen this. Okay, what's done is done. You cannot change the past, and you cannot get back what is completely lost. Embrace the reality, embrace the grieving, but also embrace that God has a purpose and a plan for you. Last week I asked the question, when did your integrity, by paying the price for integrity, when did your integrity not count? When did you paying the price for integrity not count? Whatever was used for evil, God used for good. When did your integrity, when did you paying the price for integrity not count? If God is completely in control, He has a plan. And He can use all of that for good. And I pray that you take that to heart. You know, we're talking about the next steps, and I just put the 3 questions I asked, throughout my message. What new opportunities do you need to be open to? Okay, what is God putting in front of you that you might not want to accept it? You might not even want to do it. You might not want to be bold. Okay? But if you put your trust, if you can put your trust in the God who can take things that were used for evil and turn them for good, put into God's hands what only God's hands are capable of handling. What truths are you struggling to face in your life right now? This can be about an addiction. It can be about a loved one. It can be about your own personal growth. Okay, what truths are you struggling with to face in your life right now? And when will you take the time to grieve the losses in your life? When will you take the time to do that? Let God set you free from carrying those things that you wish to feel guilty from. You don't have to feel guilty. Okay, God, in His infinite grace, His infinite mercy, gave up His Son. I got really praying about this message this week. And that last question I think is the most important for tonight. When will you take the time to grieve the losses in your life? There's no use carrying this extra baggage. Okay, if you're trying to move forward and you're still clinging on to the pains of the past and you don't know how to let go. Okay, that was the title of this message today, was letting go. If you're still clinging on to those things, pray with me. Pray with me now that God will allow you to let it go. Pray with me, please. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, I ask at this time that each and every person who is hearing this message would look deep into their own heart, deep into their own mind, into their own spirit. And Lord, you know the things that are paining us within. And I pray, Lord, that each of us can be brave enough to submit them to you. And Lord, if we are not ready to have that boldness, I pray, Lord, at this time that we can surrender everything to you. Lord, allow us to be able to trust in your word. Allow us to be able to give ourselves up. Relinquish us from our pride. Relinquish us from our guilt. Allow us to forgive each other and allow us to forgive ourselves. And Lord, I pray this in your name. And if there is anything in our heart, if there is anything that is bogging us down, Lord, I pray that you will set us free. I pray that you will set us free at this time. That we may embrace the dreams and the future that you have placed before us. That we can become the people that we were meant to be, unashamed. And it is in Jesus' name that we ask all of these things. Amen.